Okay, so I know most of you didn't do or finish the homework. I think it's like 4 people who turned it in, but I'm not really going to go over the previous homework. It's out there, and in the interest of keeping these shorter and getting them people able to watch them and finish them quicker, we're just going to dive right in. Assuming I'm from now on, I'm basically assuming you did the previous day's homework. If you didn't, it's on you to catch up, because I think a lot of people aren't doing it, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on recap for the people who are doing it. So if you're not doing it, it's officially on you. You can reach out for help, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on the past because we learned that. So people should have practiced some CSS. You should have written some HTML and gotten used to sort of like putting events on things on the page on HTML, creating a, div button or a list element, clicking it and something happens. So we're going to keep playing in that wheelhouse. So the assignment is basically going to be day 13. It's going to be, we know how to place event handlers on HTML elements in our JavaScript, and then listen for them and fire arbitrary code when that happens. We will use this now and learn something new. How to make HTTP requests. The assignment is going to be use the Axios library via NPM and the free Alchemy API to fetch NFTs and ERC20 tokens for a given address. User should input their address into an input box in HTML and click a button, then start the request and display the images, metadata, and ERC20s on the page. So we're basically going to do a little bit of this. Cyberhorsey.eth.xyz. I think I showed you guys the site before. But basically on page load, it just grabs all your NFTs. And we're going to do that for ERC20 tokens. So like, LRC should, if you have a balance of it, it should display it. Normally you'd have to scrape a scrape the blockchain directly for this. But we're going to keep just like how we use NPM libraries to do stuff like prompt, and the NPM library for ethers to do stuff like, query the blockchain for state. We're going to keep going down that path of using libraries that help us, because we're not going to query the blockchain and store all these events and track it manually to figure out what balance you have or what NFTs you own. So there's a variety of different APIs for that. An API is an application programming interface. All that is to say is it's usually a URL. So you'd go up here and be like alchemy.com/NFTs/0x1234567 blah, 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 and you'd call that route, and it would give you the NFTs for that user. But how do we call that in code is the thing, right? Make that request. So what I would do is I would start off, maybe tackle this in a variety of different ways. Let me close my other ones here. Those are going to be confusing. So we need an input on the page, a button to click to fetch the ERC20s and NFTs, a spot on the page to put the results, and some headers like ERC20 tokens and NFTs, and the JavaScript code that actually fetches and inserts the result onto the page. and some CSS to style it. So I'll start off and I'll sort of, I'll do a quick run through of how I would start this off. Right off the bat, I would get a basic working. So like a basic something without worrying about fetching the NFTs and the ERC20s. Why don't I get an input that I can put an address into and a button I can click and just log out the address? And then I know I have that part set up, an ugly version. So I'll create an input, which is the ID of like address input. Type is equal to text. Then a button. ID is equal to submit. So if I open that with a live server, let's see what I got. Yes. Okay. So I've got those two things. Oh, I still have that event handling for. So I've got an input and a button. Great. So I can type in. I can click submit. So I think I want to be right off the bat. I want to say submit button is equal to document.getElement by ID, kind of what you did before, and I called it submit button. Maybe I just called it submit. I did, but I'm going to call it submit button to make it clear in my code. So I get that by ID, and then submit button dot add event listener for when I click it. I want to run this function, and I want to const input, say const address input is equal to document.getElement by ID. I believe I called it the address input. Let's go double check. I did. I want to get the value of this text input whenever I click the button is the goal here. So I'll write that. When I click the button, I want to get the value of the address input. And I think that is off of memory address input dot value or something like that. Let's see what happens. Oops, then I got to do npm run build that you guys remember from the previous lesson that turns our, oops, I got to npm install. That turns our index.js into the bundle.js so it can run on the browser. Cool. So let's see what happens. See if I log that to the console. See if I did that. 0x1234. Yes, I did. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So now I have an input that when I click it, I get the value of the input. I've got a form, basically. Now I have the user supplied address. Now I need to be able to get ERC20s and NFTs based on this address. They will be from an API, meaning I need to call a URL like api.com/nfts/ the address here. And I will most likely receive an array of objects back. Most likely, because I haven't decided what API I'm going to use yet. I'm going to use Alchemy. You guys can feel free to use QuickNote. You can use Moralis, Infura. There's a million different options for this. You can pick one of Alchemy, QuickNote, Moralis, Infura, or any others you find. I encourage you to try one that I don't use to make your learning a little bit better. Like, go read docs yourself. But I would Google like Ethereum NFT API or ERC20 API. But how do we actually do that? How do we call this URL? Say I even know the URL. I don't know it right now, but like, how do I do it? We use a library called Axios. So if I go back to Google and I say Axios npm, it's a promise-based HTTP client. It's cool that we learned promises because this is kind of really the reason why we did it. If we go down to examples, you can make an axios.get request, pass it in the URL you want to call, and then using the .then that we learned before, so when the request is done, we'll have the response. So we can call anything like that. So if we want to try that out basically without a real API yet, let's go back here to npm install axios. We know we need to install libraries via npm. I can go up here and I can say const axios, you could require axios. This is nothing new. So let's try a dummy HTTP request. So let's do a dummy one. So if I go here, I say, okay, I need to make axios.get, and then the route, and then I get a .then. That seems cool. So I do axios.get, the URL, and right now we'll say to do .then. And what does it say to do? It wants a callback, a function of the response. So when it's done, whatever is served at that website will give me the response. So a function of the response. We can console.log the response. So do an HTTP request at whatever URL I give it, and then give me the response. It's a programmatic way, a code way of just visiting something in the browser. I bet I wonder if I could just use this URL, the npm URL, and see what we get. Call this website and give me the response. Let's see what happens. Oops, I got to run build. Do. What is this? Import access. Oh, I might only be able to use fetch. Let me Google this. We're doing it a legacy way, as you saw here. It says const axios is the legacy way to require stuff. Import is the more modular way, but let me see. Oh, it's the browserify config. I may have to set up a template. Maybe there's another library. Let's do fetch npm. I don't want to get too bogged down with some of the compiler stuff. Let's see. npm browser HTTP library. We may have to configure this. Long story short is a lot of these libraries are not made for the browser the same way that, the require is not made for the browser. And we have to run this browserify to bundle it, decompile it. We make that big mess bundle file. Axios is also not made for the browser, but you can technically use it. But it looks like it may not... it may not allow us without me configuring browserify. But if you guys want to see me try and debug it live, I'll just do that for 2 or 3 minutes. Grab that error again, copy and paste it. Go back here. No, that seems like it's wrong. Let's see, Axios. What I'll often do is if I don't find by pasting the error, the answer that I think is right, because those guys were using a bunch of libraries we weren't using. It didn't seem like it was correct. It's random error is I'll add the library we're using. So I add Axios to the start of that, and that'll kind of see if we can cut down to the chase a little bit. This might work. Let's see. And then we add this to our browserify command. If this doesn't work, I'll just move on to a different part of it. Hey, that worked. Great. So we added another package to browserify, which transforms code that does not work in the browser into code that works in the browser. We added another package to it. And then we added a little command line flag like that you guys have done before. And, you'll often have to do this as you go down rabbit holes for the browser and use different syntax and modern things. Like you have to do it again for async and await as well. Okay, let's see if that works. Let's see if I get a request. Because if we remember what we were doing back here, we were saying when I click a button, I'm going to log the address input value, but then I'm also just going to make this random HTTP request to test if Axios works to see if I'm getting a response. And I'm going to expect some sort of HTML page, I think. Axios.get is not a function, so we can take a look. Oops. Let's see, back to here. Now we're in the cycle that we usually do, which is go back to the npm Axios library. Ooh, that actually looks quite good right here. We might want to try this. Let's see. First off, so I think I've showed you guys before something like this, which is when I think something's not working, I will go back as far as I reasonably think and just log out stuff using the console. So right off the bat, when the page loads, I'm just going to log out before I run anything. I'm just going to log out what Axios is because it's telling me .get is not a function on Axios. So maybe that browserify thing didn't work. Maybe there's other issues, but now I'm going to log out Axios right when I get to the page and just see if I got anything back from this package. I did. I get something. So it did import correctly is what I know. Oh, it does have a .get property. Let's see what Axios.get is. Same thing. And I'll rebundle it. And try and log out something more specific. And Axios.get is undefined. So it may be that it's, oops, got to run build. And it may be the browserify issue still. Okay, no. So see, when we're doing the require way, here's all the functions we want, the get function. But it's actually giving me a class, Axios. We've made classes before, right? We've done that before with our game. We've done that before with the last homework had exercises with the Steam and stuff. So I think we need to say we need a new Axios. So I wonder if I do this, if I say, oops, no. Let's see if that gives me anything. Oh, that looks like it's right. Okay, cool. So just like we logged out, this can be kind of a useful loop to watch potentially. As we logged out the Axios that I required, we looked around, the method I was looking for wasn't there, but it's actually that we need to create a new instance of this class called Axios, and it's on the import. So we need a new Axios.Axios class. So I think I can say here, new Axios.Axios.get. Let's see if that works. Submit my address. Okay. So let's keep logging stuff out. Let's go in here and let's say const Axios. Oops. My Axios equal to. Console.log my Axios out, doing the same thing that I usually do, which is going to where I think I can get, I don't need to go all the way back to the top of the page where we log stuff in, but I think I want to see what I'm actually creating here when I create this class. We hover over it, we see it as a constructor. I might need to pass in something to the config here because it looks like it takes an optional config object. If I right click and go to the definition, I can take a look at that. It does have a get method or get function, which we can see, which is what we're trying to call. I'm trying to make a get request, trying to get something with it. I think we might need to make a Axios instance potentially. We're looking through the Axios package now, which is one of the more useful. I kind of talked about this with some people in private a little bit, but one of the more useful skills is sort of understanding all the basics enough: classes, objects, functions, variables, loops, and stuff like that. So you can look through this stuff that other people wrote. It doesn't really matter. I'm not reading the rest of this crap, right? I'm practicing a skill that lets me parse through garbage to get to where I want. Yeah, I'm trying to create a new instance of this class. Maybe I didn't create it correctly because, just like your Steam users and your game that we made, that World of Warcraft game before, you needed to pass things into the constructor or it didn't work. And if you used the ethers library, it was the same thing. You needed to pass stuff in, it didn't work. But when stuff goes wrong, if you know the basics quite well, you can go back to where we were, right click. You can right click this, the Axios class, go to definition and start seeing, does this thing even have the functions I want? Am I doing the right thing? Maybe I need to pass in this config. Maybe I need to create this instead. Maybe there's something else I'm missing here. So we go back here. We're going to log out the instance of Axios that I make and see what happens. Submit the form, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, the defaults are undefined. So it looks like I did not create an instance of the right thing. So again, we've went back, we've kind of logged the most top thing in the page. We're still trying to make an HTTP request, but I'm kind of glad this is not working right out of the box because it's kind of showing maybe what you guys haven't seen, which is someone's real life debugging process. So we know that we don't need to create an instance of this. I think it's actually incorrect to create this because it doesn't seem to have the properties we want anymore on it. It doesn't really have a get properly, I don't think. It thinks it does, but it actually doesn't if we go back here. Or maybe it's the URL that's wrong. Maybe we can say example get API for testing. Cool. This is going to give me, oh my God, let me do it. There we go. So this should return me this object, basically. See how it just actually returns me a JavaScript object? Got this curly braces, things in quotes. It's not formatted very nice, but if I call this request and it works, it should give me a JavaScript object. So we can actually use that for testing this part of the code to see if this is the right thing that I've made. This, 1, 2, 3. Nope, that was unrelated. And we go back here. We can say maybe they don't actually support this legacy way of creating it. Scroll down, see if anything helps us. We can try this. This is a different syntax to make a GET request. We comment this out. We replace myaxios.getURL. Wants the URL here. Put that in there. See if this does anything. No, Axios is not a function. So it might not actually work in the browser. I'm going to debug it for about another minute. And if not, then I'll get a different library. But we can undo this. We can create a new instance of Axios. So maybe this will do it. I don't think we can create one directly like that. That's my Axios. We can get rid of this. Let's see if that does anything. No. So we can take a look through here and see if we're missing anything or it potentially just doesn't work. I will say one of the annoying things about JavaScript versus other languages is that there's multiple environments for it. One of them is running code in the terminal, right? Like we've done that. We've written our code in the terminal. The other one is running it in the browser. And sometimes you have to go through an annoying compilation process to change them. It says here crate should exist. Maybe the syntax was just wrong because it says here we have let's log it up one more time. Right on page load because it says there should be a crate method. So either it's being stripped away from the browserify thing or it's not working. Oops, they're not wrong, Bill. Yes, we actually do not have a crate method, so it is being stripped away by the browserify thing, unfortunately. So we can see we're looking for a create method that we wanted, a create function rather. On here, this is a list of functions in the console. If nobody's seen this before, we're logging out the whole import when we say, sorry, the whole require when we say const axios is equal to require axios. This is the whole export. And we can kind of see all the different things we get from it. Oh, and there's our create on a .default property. So let's see if that exists. Well, it's a function. So by calling it, npm run build. Oops, go back to the console. Interesting. Wonder if I can do this. Let's see if that browserify module will let me do it the non-legacy way, which I kind of wanted to avoid teaching you guys. But we'll see. Okay, it did work. Okay, so we can't use the legacy way. Okay, so really quickly before I get into that, so I can explain what happens here, is I've told you guys there's multiple runtime environments. JavaScript is a very old language. You can require stuff, but you can also import. And importing has a reason that people use it over require. You know, there's const axios is equal to require from the package axios. These are usually identical, but they're not always identical. Because using the import, when you do the require syntax, you take the whole thing every single time, right? We've seen that in the past. I'm going to include this file and I'm going to require the entire file to do it. You don't get to say what from the file you're taking. With the import syntax, you can. You can just say, I want to import just the create function. And instead of here, I would call this just create. So it's kind of stupid to teach you guys it this early, but it's important later for speed optimization. If I'm just going to use one function out of an entire package, only let me import one function from the whole package so I don't have to download 80 kilobytes of stuff from this package. And when you have 1,000 packages in your app, it adds up to 5 megabytes of space every time. And that's the whole reason for this. So sorry for the detour, but that's the only difference really. But I'll set you guys up with a package.json with with this that allows us to use import. So okay, let's go back here. Let's take a look at our thing. When we ran this, we got a response. If you remember, what we're calling is this API here that lets us. It's just a test API, just a test route for you to test out, and it returns a big JavaScript object. So when our Axios request fires, which we do when we click the button, we add an event listener for the button click, and then we get the address by ID, which we're not fully using yet. We make an Axios request to that URL. And when we log out the response, we see, over here, we log out the response, we see I got this whole object back. And it's not quite what we expected, right? We expected to get this one with page 2, per page this Tobias. Oh, it's all Arrested Development characters. Amazing. Tobias Funke, Byron Fields name, an array of user objects, basically. So if we go back here, we didn't get that. We did get it on the data property of the response. So it looks like, yeah, this is what we want. Yeah. And then we got the objects here of our guys. Great. So if I go back to the code, I know that response was the whole thing. So response.data should be, let's see, response is the whole object that came back. it includes a bunch of different info. Status codes, the length of the response, headers, etc. We can ignore those for now. Axios will give us the actual thing we requested at .data. So if we do this again, build, go back here, submit the form. Hey, there, I got just the data. So this is the actual response object. So now we've kind of gotten to the third point. We've gotten to say, okay, I've got the button click event. I've got my input. I've got the user's address, and I can make an HTTP request. So if we're at the point now where if I could replace this URL with the real NFT API URL, I'd be logging out a list of the user's NFTs. And you will make a zillion HTTP requests in your lifetime. It's probably the most common thing to do on a website. So if I go over here and click the console's here, but if I click the network, these are all my HTTP requests that I make. And you can see me making them. And if I go to Google, open it up, click network, refresh the page. Look how many Google makes to load this page for me. This is this many calls to axios.gets and stuff like this. That's how many there are. Probably fucking Christ, 60, 70. You will do this all the time for everything. You get tons of data from different sources, and then you aggregate it to display it on your page. So we're going to be doing it a bunch as well. We've got a need to replace this with something that gets me valid data. So I don't know if I want to go ahead and do the NFT section for you. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll do it in the video, but not push the code up, because that'll be at least explain it a little bit. So I'm going to use Alchemy NFT API. So Alchemy NFT API docs is what I'll Google, and I'll get this NFT API quick start. And look, if I keep the network tab open, these are a bazillion different requests. Like, look how many .js, how many JavaScript files it requested, like fucking 60 of them. And then image counts. You can see, I can see a preview of the image here. Getting used to this tooling over here is very useful. You can just analyze a lot of what's going on. Sometimes you'll be able to diagnose your own problems and be like, oh my God, I didn't realize I wasn't making a request because nothing fired there. It's very common. So we see we have a getting started for the NFT API. I've already created a account. You guys can create your own Alchemy accounts, just like I believe I made you create an Infura account before. So that'll be click get started for free. You can see here when it says getting started instructions, I have a package manager. We're using NPM. We've done that. That's great. These docs are going to be pretty good. Set up your repo and then choose a library. Recommends the Alchemy SDK. We are not going to pick that one because we're learning how to make HTTP requests ourselves. The Alchemy SDK, the software development kit, will do all of this for you, and that you can try it after for sure if you want. But you can see how simple it is. It's import Alchemy from the Alchemy SDK, create a new instance of the Alchemy class, largely similar to what we just did with Axios. But then you literally just have to call alchemy.nft.getNFTs for owner and pass in the address, and it'll give you all of their NFTs. It's too easy for us right now. I still recommend you guys try it. And if you get stuck, you've got the option here. You can install the Alchemy SDK versus an NPM and use it. But there's also the Axios instructions. And this will let us make it with a raw HTTP call. That's what we're trying to learn. In a real world scenario, I would probably use the Alchemy SDK. I've done it before for work at different jobs. So we can see here, you guys can read the instructions yourselves. But it basically says, give me an API key. It's giving me the URL. So it's giving me the owner address. So we have that. So if I take this stuff, We already have an Axios config as well, and we do the .then already. So it looks like I need to take this section. You guys type it, I get to copy and paste it. So let's get rid of, sorry, let's go up here. This. Okay. Now let's think about what we have because we have this information. We want to say the base URL is this. They're going to give us this URL to call. We need to replace this demo API key with my API key. And then this owner address with what we have up here, the address input value. And then we should be able to make the request. So let's go top to bottom first. My API key. View my API key. And I can get it right here. Copy it. Paste it in. There's my API key. Now this URL should be good because it takes my API key to get NFTs. And replace the wallet address with the one you want to query for NFTs. Well, actually, it's address input.value is the one we want to use because we're actually taking a user submitted one. We can get rid of this section. We can get rid of this section. We get rid of this URL. We're not using that anymore. And we can just say axios.get. Oh, sorry. We want to do, if we go back to the NFT API quick start, it says Axios config. And let's see what we got. See if that does anything. See, I don't know if it'll work with ENS yet, but let's see if Cyberhorsey.eth does anything. Whoa, I got all my NFTs. That's simple with that HTTP request. You can see it's giving me all the same shit we just saw in cyberhorsey.eth.xyz. With just that tiny bit of code combining Axios and that API key, we're able to actually get all my NFTs. And you can see that what it gives me is an object, and the object has 3 properties. The block hash that it, like this is going to be like the latest block hash. Like here are your NFTs up to this block hash on Ethereum. How many I have, so the total count is 35. It's a number. And then an owned NFTs property, which is going to be an array. It's an array of 35 objects, and each one is going to be the same. That contract we talked about before, right? Where I said, users look like this. Discord messages look like this. Discord users look like this. They have a user, they have a name, they have an isAdmin property. They have all that stuff. Well, they're doing the same thing here with NFTs. NFTs, everyone in the array is going to be identical, and you can treat them the same. Here's an object out in the array. The first one has a balance, the contract address, which is an object, has an address property. The contract metadata, which is another object, and it has this third eye ape. The symbol. There's even an OpenSea property. You can access all this stuff. I can access this right now by saying, okay, response.data.ownedNFTs 0 in brackets dot OpenSea.collection name. I'll show you that right now. So let's say response.data.ownedNFTs dot. Oh no, that's the array. So let's get the 0th one. 0th one dot contract metadata. Yep. Dot contract metadata dot OpenSea dot collection name. See if I typed all that out correctly. But you can see how it's just object dot object property dot object property. Oops, it's an array. Access the array dot another object property, and we read that from the console here, which is helping us like parse stuff, right? It's helping us like make sense of some of the stuff. Oh, yeah, I got it. Third Eye Apes v1. That was the Third Eye Apes v1 is the value of the response.data.owned NFTs, the 0th element in the array, .contract metadata, OpenSea.collection name. I go back and I just say, go back to just logging the whole response.data, cyberhorsey.eth. Get that array back, all my shitty NFTs. What I can do now is I can loop over this array, the .owned NFTs. So if I go back here and I say, I get the NFTs, whoops, from the Alchemy API at response.data.owned NFTs, which is an array. I could now loop over that array and create a new HTML image and display that image on the page, which is literally what cyberhorsey.eth.xyz did, the site, right? They make a request and then they just loop over it and decide how they're going to display it, and they style each one with CSS. That's like what that website is. That guy like makes money or fucking something doing that, which is, you know, very nice. So if I go here and I say, well, I want to display the image, right? Like, your job is to hunt for that. You know you're getting an NFT API, and now you can kind of look at the data and you can say, okay, well, is it the contract? No, it's the contract address. You decide what you're going to display on the page when you display the NFTs. If you go look at fucking this one, they displayed this, but then you click it and you get more data here. But you only get certain data. They've decided here to play a thumbnail on the main screen, but you click it and you get the full video. Well, knowing this is the flying fuck, how would I do that? So let's look for the one that's the flying fuck. It's here it is, number 32, because the title flying fuck. There's a media property, so that probably gives me, like, you know, most likely I think it's there. So look like this one gives me a zero in a format PNG. If I click the metadata, oh, I get an animation URL, a .mp4. So I could access the image, the thumbnail. Oh yeah, here, .image at response.data.owned NFTs, array index 32, .metadata.image would give me this image. So why don't we try and just hard code that? Let's say const flying fuck image is response.data.owned NFTs 32 dot media, was it? Dot metadata. Metadata dot image. Let's console.log that to make sure I have it correct. And I'll write a comment to myself. Animation URL, the MP4, is available at .animation URL. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, sorry, no, I need to do a real address now because I'm actually doing something. Hey, cool. I got the image. Let's copy it and just go take a look at it here. If I paste it into here, oh, fuck, it's an IPFS URL. I am stupid. But IPFS URLs we can cover probably next lesson. Wonder if it's external. Oh, there's a link to Rarible. They minted it at Rarible. No, that's another link. So you can see kind of what I do with my thought process here is I kind of poke around a little bit. For me, it's quite quick to read this. You guys might be confused, but the important part is, I'm poking around and I'm trying to solve it myself. I know I want to display an image on the page. I probably want to display the name as well. Maybe we'll start with the name and I'll leave IPFS URLs for the next day homework because you actually have to change them. You cannot use an IPFS URL in the browser. You have to use a gateway. Why don't I just try and display the name to the page, which will be nice, and the description. So metadata, I believe metadata.name is the name here, and metadata.description. I've even got the attributes, so I can do const flying fuck name is equal to font state data that onft32 metadata image dot flying dot name, and then I can say okay const let's go to the index.html. I'll just put something in here and I'll say my favorite NFT name is, create a span element, call it an NFT name, and we can put my favorite NFT name there. So we can say const name is equal to document.get element by ID, NFT name. I think I just called it. I have no memory. I did call it an NFT name. And then we can say name dot, I believe, inner HTML. Probably inner text, but we'll see. We'll see if this works. I'm gonna set the inside of that span equal to the name. Hey, flying fuck rendered to the page. So what we've done is end to end here, right? We have so much more information than this. And this is where UI and UX and stuff really comes into play. Is like you have so much information here from that Axios response that you could overload the user and display everything. Imagine if you went through and displayed, the contract address, the token type, the total supply of the token. You can display the floor price on OpenSea. That's actually probably good to display. Like cyberhorsey.ethernet.xyz, the other site, does not display the floor price. That's a very cool one, I think. Some of this stuff is fucking stupid to display. But good UX and good UI comes from deciding what to do. And every site is like this. Every site has access to all this insane amount of information, and they decide which to display and where to display it. But we could render so much of this to the page. But this is sort of enough, I think, because I've already been talking an hour. This is enough to say, like, wow, we can just from clicking a tiny button and writing like how many lines of code, like 43 lines of code, which half of it's comments, we can get all the NFTs for a user and start making like a real dApp. So the homework is going to be doing what I just did with me erasing this, but you guys have the video to follow along with, and to display all of an addresses, NFTs to the page with at least the image and the name. And then you can display other stuff and decide how to display it. And what CSS classes to add and how to add it to the page. Instead of doing what I did here, where you say, I'm going to create an NFT, my favorite NFT name. This isn't scalable because there's only one. So what you'd actually do is create something like this, just to give you guys a head start. Is like, oh my god, take off caps lock. You'd be like, create a header, and then create a div here called like IDs equal to NFTs. And then now we have a div that can store all, actually, to make it very clear, we'll call all -NFTs. And in here, instead of this, I would say loop over all of response.data.owned NFTs, something like this. Oops, gotta capitalize it. You can see we're using a lot of the stuff that we only really used in exercises before, but we're combining a lot of it now. Promises, for loops. We're going to loop over that array it gave me, so it doesn't matter how many there are. We don't care how many there are. If there's none, this will run no times. If there's a million, it'll run a million times. But loop over each one, we can say const NFT is equal to response.data.owned NFTs I, which we've done before. So now we say, now the variable NFT is an individual NFT object on each loop. We need to create a new HTML element now and insert it into the page in the all NFTs div. I'm not going to do that part because I want some of the stuff to be like a full-on challenge, and for you guys have to Google it. But you'll start off with like, const my element is equal to document.create element, an image tag maybe, and then say image.source is equal to nft.media.image or whatever, You'll have to do some Googling on that, but you have to you can create HTML in your JavaScript, just insert it to the page, and it'll run in this loop each time. And when you run your thing, you'll have 35, however many NFTs you have, 35 images on the page, and then you'll need to style them. And then you can do this in that same loop, create a named element and insert it to the HTML page. Yeah, it's a lot, but we're going to be doing this a lot now, or this is kind of, the bread and butter of programming. And I hope you guys kind of see how powerful, how little code can be once we get the hang of it. There's a full career in app making that do this kind of stuff. Any questions? Wonky, you're just coming through as static.
Wonky, you're underwater.
Yeah. I'm going to take that as a...
Is that any better?
Yes, much better.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you scroll up to the top?
Yes.
Where you do address input dot value instead of just address input. Is there a reason? Do you have to do dot value?
Yes. So here I say, get me the HTML element with the ID of address input, right? And that's this. But it gets me the whole element on the page, the entire thing. And if we go to the page here, we right click the element, you can see that it's an input as an ID, as a type of text. And if I type, oh no, it's not going to be right. It's not going to do that. I forgot. It's not the right framework. It's the whole thing. So if I see like document get element by ID, and I go look at this here, we can see other properties it has. Value gets the value of the input specifically. It gets the thing you typed in it. But you can see if I get the element by ID, I can also use .style.color. I can change its color when I get the element by ID because it gets me the whole thing, the whole object. But I only want to get its value property, the thing that I actually typed in it. You can also change its ID. See, this guy got an element. So const element is the whole object again. And he changed its ID by accessing the .id property. So when I go here and I get the element by ID, we can console.log the whole input before I do the value. And we'll see what I get. See, I got the whole input here. So if I didn't use dot value, I wouldn't have anything here. I just have this whole HTML object, right? Dot value is a property that lets me get the actual value of a form input. And document.getElementById returns me the actual HTML, returns me this thing, which has methods on it like dot value. Or I could say, the same thing, like address input dot style dot order dot color. See, it knows all this stuff already. There's a lot of other properties on it. But to get the actual value of the input, the thing I typed in the form box, I need to use dot value. Does that help at all?
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else? Was it a lot? Probably a lot.
Not too bad.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you did the previous homework, the only real difference here is, this block here, and the concept of like digging through the console and getting familiar with shit like that, and arrays, and we're actually using a for loop now to actually fucking do something instead of just loop over arbitrary dumb shit. Cool. I will